I was 16 when I started dating Sarah. Our neighborhood was one of those picture-perfect suburbs where nothing ever seemed to go wrong. She lived just a couple houses down, so I'd often walk over after dark. One Thursday, bored out of my mind, I decided to head to her place. It was late, but my parents were pretty relaxed about curfew. About halfway there, I started picking up on sounds in the silence behind me. The first was a rustling in a hedge. I glanced back, but didn't stop, just quickened my pace. A block later, a distinct snap, like a twig breaking underfoot. This time, I stopped and turned completely. The street was empty, just a long line of manicured bushes separating the sidewalks from dark houses. I started walking faster, almost at a jog, her house now in sight. Then came the footsteps, light, rapid, and way too close. I spun around, still moving, and saw nothing. I called Sarah, my voice shaky, explaining the noises. She picked up instantly. As I rounded the bushes into her driveway, I looked up and saw her at her bedroom window. She waved, phone to her ear, and I waved back. Then her voice cut through my panic. "Who is that man right behind you?" I turned, and a grown man was crouched, not 10 feet away. I screamed and sprinted for the door, pounding on the wood. He grabbed at me, his arm locking around my neck, but then he just let go and vanished into the night. Sarah's mom yanked the door open, pulled me inside, and slammed it shut. The police were called. I stayed there that night, my heart still hammering in my chest. My family has always loved stormy nights. This one was particularly violent. I was in my room watching a movie. My parents were downstairs, and my sister was gaming above me. A monstrous thud hit my window pane. I leapt up. Through the rain-streaked glass, a blurred face stared back. He started pounding, his muffled screams begging for help. I cracked the window. "Help me! I'm hurt!" he yelled over the downpour. "Go to the front door," I shouted back, then slammed the window shut and ran to get my dad. As I explained, frantic knocking started at the front door. My dad moved to answer it, but I grabbed his arm. "Wait." The phone rang. Our neighbor's name flashed on the TV. My dad answered, and his face went pale. "You've got to be kidding me," he whispered. He hung up and told us to stay away from the door. Peeking through the window blinds, he saw a man crouched on our porch, clutching a large axe. My dad yelled through the door that the cops were coming. The man eventually fled. Our neighbor told us he'd seen someone steal the axe from his shed. They caught the guy wandering the streets later that night. When I was little, I was watching cartoons in the living room, the volume loud. I clearly heard my mom call my name from the basement. I yelled, "What?" No answer. I heard it again, more insistent. I muted the TV and headed down. The basement was pitch black. "Mom?" I called out from the stairs. Silence. I was about to go back up when I heard it a third time. Her voice unmistakable, coming from the darkness below. A wave of primal fear hit me. I scrambled up the stairs, crying for my real mom. She came rushing down from the upstairs, confused. I sobbed, telling her something was mimicking her voice from the basement. She went down to check to comfort me, but I could tell she didn't really believe me. I know what I heard. My grandfather lives on a remote farm. He used to have a little Boston Terrier, Buster. Every evening, he'd walk Buster on a dirt trail by the woods. One sunset, they passed a man in a large hooded jacket. Buster barked and strained on his leash. My grandpa said hello, but the stranger just walked past without a word. They continued, but Buster kept looking back and growling. Annoyed, my grandpa's turned to see what was wrong. The hooded man was hiding behind a tree, watching them. My grandpa sped up, his hand closing around the pepper spray in his coat pocket. He was almost home when he heard leaves crunch right behind him. Before he could react, a gloved hand clamped over his mouth and nose. He struggled, hearing Buster's furious barks and feeling the dog bite at the attacker. That distraction was just enough. He fumbled for his pepper spray, found it, and sprayed blindly until the man screamed and released him. My grandpa ran all the way back to the house, shaken but safe. I grew up in a rough part of California known for gang activity. My best friend, Mike, lived 2 doors down. When we were 12, we were biking around at dusk and decided to check out an abandoned house everyone said was haunted. As we pulled up, Mike pointed to a window. "Look." I squinted. There was a face peering between the curtains. It didn't move. We crept closer and realized it looked like a fake Halloween head. We figured someone had broken in and left it as a prank. Being dumb kids, we decided to sneak in through the back, which was unlocked. The house was dark and reeked. We went to the living room to get the head. I picked it up from the windowsill and immediately dropped it. It was heavy and felt like real skin. A dark liquid oozed from the neck onto the floor. It was a real human head. From the ceiling above, we heard 2 distinct creaks. We didn't wait to see more. We bolted out the back door, grabbed our bikes, and never looked back. We later found out it was a gang-related message. The person who put it there was probably still in the house when we were. Last year, around 9 p.m., a man knocked on our door. We live way out in the country, so this was bizarre. I got my mom. He started talking about a new business, asked if she preferred American-made goods, and handed her a bottle of bleach as a free sample. He walked back to his minivan to get a vacuum cleaner, and that's when my mom saw 4 other men sitting inside. She told me to run and get the phone. I couldn't find it, so I grabbed a kitchen knife and stood just out of sight. She threw the bleach bottle into the yard and screamed at them to leave, threatening to call the cops. They sped off, and we never saw that van again. I'm an adrenaline junkie. My friend Jake agreed to go backcountry skiing with me, way off the marked trails. We drove for hours, then hiked deep into the hills with all our camping and ski gear. After setting up camp, we scouted the slopes. At one point, we got separated skiing down a big hill. I figured I'd meet Jake at the bottom. I tried his walkie, no answer. While I was walking at the base, I ran into another skier in a mask. He was friendly, asking about the best runs and if we were camping. He had skis on his orange pack. I pointed toward my camp and the hill I'd just done. He said he and his wife were looking for a spot near other people and asked if I could show him. Reluctantly, I agreed. I keyed my walkie to tell Jake I was heading back, but only got static. I led the way, making small talk. Then I turned and asked, "So, where's your wife?" He didn't answer. He just started walking toward me, faster now. That's when I recognized the skis and backpack. They were Jake's. I panicked, dove into my tent for the flare gun. The man grabbed my leg, and I felt a sharp, burning pain. He'd stabbed me with a knife. I aimed the flare gun, and he backed off, hands in the air. I demanded to know where Jake was. "At the bottom of the hill," he stammered. I called 911 while he ran. A rescue helicopter eventually found me, and we located Jake, unconscious in the snow, also stabbed and robbed. We both recovered. I lived in a small college town. One night, I was on my front porch studying late. A girl from the ground floor apartment came home from the bars, clearly drunk. She barely got inside before a guy appeared out of the shadows and knocked. She opened it, and he introduced himself. Weird for 2:30 a.m. I stayed to watch. He was creepy, stroking her hair and inching closer. I made noise with my textbook so he'd know I was there. He left soon after. We called the cops. Days later, we worked with a sketch artist. The composite was released, and he was identified as a serial rapist who followed lone women home. This girl was lucky she lived so close. He never got to offer his fake cab ride. My one and only Craigslist experience was a nightmare. I was buying a ping pong table. I drove to the guy's house, texted him I was there, and saw the door open. I went for a handshake. He ignored it. In a deep, raspy voice, he told me to follow him to the basement. The house had a strange smoky odor. The table was in the middle of the room. "I need to find the paddles," he said, then ran back upstairs, telling me to wait. After 10 minutes, I got snoopy. The framed photos were all just of him, alone. I found a back room. A desk drawer was slightly open. Inside were Polaroids of a girl tied to a chair, her mouth taped. There were yellow folders labeled A through Z. I tried to take a picture with my phone, but had no service. I ran back to the basement door. It was locked. I heard his voice on the other side, apologizing, saying he'd find the key. I stayed silent, ran back to the desk, grabbed screwdrivers, and managed to pick the lock with the smallest one. I burst out, jumped in my car, and drove straight to the police. They investigated. The man was part of a child pornography ring on the dark web. Why he locked me in there, I'll never know. When I was 14, I babysat a 6-year-old named Leo. His parents warned me he had an imaginary friend named Molly and would talk to himself. It was a rainy afternoon. I was watching TV while Leo played on the floor with his toys. He kept saying Molly was playing with him. One of his toys, a little racing game with a crank, suddenly turned on across the room. I asked Leo how. He said, "Molly's playing with it." I turned it off. Later, I was in the bathroom washing up. A knock came at the door. "Leo?" I called, opening it. No one. I looked down the hall just as a door at the end slowly creaked open. I turned off the bathroom light and walked in, expecting Leo. He was just sitting on the bed in the corner watching me. "Who opened the door, Leo?" I asked. "Molly did," he said. I picked him up and spent the rest of the night in the lit living room. When his parents asked me to sit again, I always found an excuse. I used to work the night shift at a 24-hour convenience store. It was usually dead after midnight, just me and the security cameras. One night, around 3 a.m., a man came in wearing a heavy coat despite the warm weather. He browsed the aisles slowly, occasionally glancing at me. I felt uneasy. He finally brought a few items to the counter, a pack of batteries, a candy bar, and a knife. I rang him up, my hands trembling. As he left, he said, "See you soon." The next night, he returned at the same time. This went on for a week. I told my manager, but he said I was overreacting. On the 8th night, the man didn't come in. Instead, I saw him standing outside, staring through the glass door. I called the police. When they arrived, he was gone, but they found a note tucked under the door. "I know when you're alone." They reviewed the cameras and recognized him as a suspect in several burglaries. I quit the next day. My apartment had a shared laundry room in the basement. One evening, I was doing laundry when I heard faint crying coming from the storage room next door. I thought it might be a cat or a child. I called out, "Hello, is someone there?" The crying stopped. I finished my laundry and headed upstairs. The next night, I heard it again. This time, it sounded like a woman sobbing. I told my landlord, but he said no one else had reported anything. Curious, I went down with a flashlight. The storage room was locked, but the crying seemed to be coming from inside. I pressed my ear to the door and heard a whisper, "Help me." I ran back up and called the police. They broke into the room and found a homeless woman who had been squatting there for weeks. She was mentally ill and had been hiding after hours. It was sad, but the sound still haunts me. I love hiking, and one weekend I went alone to a remote trail. About an hour in, I noticed a man following me. Every time I stopped, he would stop and pretend to tie his shoe. I sped up, but he matched my pace. I decided to leave the trail and cut through the woods to lose him. I thought I had, but then I heard footsteps behind me again. I started running, and so did he. I tripped and fell, scraping my knee. When I looked up, he was standing over me. He reached out his hand to help me up, and I hesitated. Then he said, "You dropped this," and handed me my water bottle that had fallen from my pack. He was just a fellow hiker trying to return it. I felt so stupid, but the fear was real. My friend and I were exploring an old cemetery at night for fun. We were taking photos when I captured a figure in one of the pictures that wasn't there when I took it. It looked like a woman in a white dress. We laughed it off as a trick of the light. But as we were leaving, I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I turned, and no one was there. We ran to the car and drove away. When we checked the photos later, the figure was in every shot, getting closer each time. We deleted them and never went back. I was house-sitting for my aunt in a quiet neighborhood. One night, I heard scratching at the back door. I thought it was a branch or an animal. It went on for hours. Finally, I looked out the peephole and saw a man kneeling, scratching at the door with his fingers. I called the police, and they caught him. He was a neighbor with dementia who had wandered off. It was heartbreaking, but in the moment, it was terrifying. I received a package in the mail that I didn't order. It was a small box with a single old key inside. There was no return address. I threw it away, but the next day another package arrived, this time with a lock of hair. I called the police, and they traced it to a stalker who had been watching me for months. He was arrested, but I still get chills thinking about what he planned to do with that key. I was camping with friends, and we told ghost stories around the fire. Later that night, I woke up to see a shadow figure standing at the edge of our campsite. It didn't move, just watched us. I woke my friends, but by the time they looked, it was gone. In the morning, we found footprints in the mud that didn't match any of ours. We packed up and left immediately. I was home alone when the power went out. I lit a candle and waited. Suddenly, I heard footsteps upstairs. I knew I was alone. I grabbed a baseball bat and crept up the stairs. The footsteps stopped. I checked every room. Nothing. As I turned to go back down, the candle flickered and went out. I felt a cold breeze, and then the power came back on. I never found out what it was, but I don't stay alone anymore. I was driving on a deserted road at night when my car broke down. My phone had no signal. I saw a light in the distance and walked toward it. It was an old farmhouse. I knocked, and an elderly couple answered. They let me use their phone, but as I waited for a tow truck, I noticed photos on the wall, all of children, but they looked old-fashioned. The couple were sweet, but I felt uneasy. When the tow truck arrived, I left quickly. Later, I learned that the farmhouse had been abandoned for years. I don't know who I met that night. I was at a library studying when I found a note tucked in a book. It said, "I'm watching you." I thought it was a prank, but then I started seeing the same man in different sections of the library. I told security, and they reviewed the cameras. The man was a former employee who had been stalking several students. He was banned from the premises. I now study at home. I was swimming in a lake when I felt something brush against my leg. I thought it was weeds, but then it wrapped around my ankle and pulled me under. I struggled to the surface, gasping. My friends saw nothing. We left the water, and later we heard stories of drownings in that lake. I never went back. I was babysitting a toddler who pointed to a corner and said, "The tall man is smiling." There was no one there. Then the toys started moving on their own. I called the parents, and they came home early. They said the house had a history, but they didn't believe in ghosts. I never babysat for them again. I was in a hotel room when I heard knocking on the wall. It was rhythmic, like a code. I knocked back, and it stopped. Then I heard a voice through the vent. Let me in. I called the front desk, and they said the room next door was empty. They moved me to another room, but I didn't sleep that night. I found an old diary at a flea market. It detailed the life of a girl from the 1950s. As I read it, I noticed similarities to my own life. One entry described a dream she had that matched a dream. I was walking my dog when he started growling at a bush. A man jumped out and tried to grab me. My dog attacked him, and he ran away. The police found him later. He was a wanted criminal. I thank my dog every day. I was in a parking garage at night when I heard footsteps echoing. I turned and no one was there. Then I saw a figure standing between cars. I ran to my car and locked the doors. As I drove away, I saw him in my rearview mirror watching me. I reported it, but they never found anyone. I was home alone when the TV turned on by itself. It was static. Then a voice came through. I'm in the house. I ran outside and called the police. They found no one, but the back door was unlocked. I now check all locks twice. I was on a train when a woman sat next to me and whispered, "Don't get off at the next stop." I thought she was crazy, but I stayed on. Later, I heard that there was an accident at that stop. I never saw her again. I was cleaning my attic and found a box of old letters. They were from a relative I never knew, describing a hidden treasure. I followed the clues and found a locked chest. When I opened it, it was empty, except for a note. You shouldn't have looked. I felt a presence behind me, and then the attic door slammed shut. I managed to get out, but I never went back up there. If these true stories sent a chill down your spine, show some support and like this video. And follow Winds of Thought for more real tales from the shadows.